British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak warned last week that a vote for Nigel Farage's Reform UK party would give Labour the election victory after a poll put the right-wing groupies ahead of Sunak's Conservatives for the first time. Farage is one of Britain's best-known politicians, best known for his decades-long and ultimately successful crusade for Britain to leave the European Union. His Reform UK party was launched in 2018 as the Brexit party, when negotiations over Britain's exit from the EU were in their infancy. Farage's unexpected return to the forefront of politics has split support among centre-right voters and dealt a severe blow to Sunak's hopes of winning an election he was predicted to lose to the opposition Labour Party anyway. This was reflected in a YouGov poll last week, which put Reform UK on 19%, up from 17% previously, and the Conservative Party unchanged on 18%. The Labour Party, led by Keir Starmer, topped the poll on 37%. If this poll were to be repeated, it would be a blank cheque for Labour, is what Sunak said in Italy, where he was attending the G7 summit, as British media reported. Ultimately, a vote for anyone who is not a Conservative candidate makes it more likely that Keir Starmer will be in number 10, he said. Farage said his party had made a phenomenal start to the campaign and was now the real opposition to Starmer's Labour. The Labour Party, said Farage, who has unsuccessfully run for Parliament 7 times before, had never been tested to implement the changes he called for, but should not be underestimated. As far as Labour versus Reform goes, we will take them on. We will challenge them in the battle of ideas and the battle of arguments, is what Labour's head of health policy told Sky News. Other opinion polls put the Conservatives much further ahead of Reform, but most still show a rise in support for the party since Farage took office. However you look at it, even if it's not the case that Reform is ahead, on average they could still be 4 or 5 points behind. This is still bad news for the Conservatives, at least in the opinion of pollster John Curtis. Despite the strong result, Reform is not expected to win many or even any parliamentary seats. Their support is comparatively evenly spread across the country, while support for the larger and more established parties is more concentrated by geographic area. The UK has a first-past-the-post system, meaning the Reform Party could receive millions of votes nationwide without winning any of Parliament's 650 constituencies. Farage has not set a target for the number of seats he wants to win. We have a completely outdated electoral system. It's not practical, but it is what it is, he told the BBC. Whatever we do, we may not get the number of seats we deserve. But will we win seats in Parliament? Yes. How many? We have the wind at our backs, and there are still 3 long weeks ahead of us, is what Farage says. Nigel Farage actually did not want to run for the general election on July 4th. At least that is what the right-wing populists said in May. But you are allowed to change your mind, is what the head of the Reform UK party said beamingly at the beginning of June. Farage has run in such elections 6 times without success, but nevertheless he has shaped British politics like no other. He indeed played a key role in getting the British to say yes to leaving the EU, and with his then Brexit party, he helped to overthrow then Prime Minister Theresa May. Farage has been pushing the Conservatives to the right for years. An opinion poll last week now shows that Farage's candidacy was the right one, and his party Reform could even do better than the Tories, and that could exacerbate the looming election defeat of the Conservatives. And there is already speculation about whether the Tories will soon have to merge with Reform. With Farage as leader? Well, we will see. But it's astonishing that no one is talking about Brexit anymore, least of all Farage, and no one denies that leaving the EU was a big mistake. But who will take political responsibility now? Certainly not Farage. He now prefers to talk only about migration. But according to 3 new polls, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's British Conservatives are indeed facing a crushing defeat in the parliamentary elections. And according to the polls published on Saturday evening, Keir Starmer's Labour Party is likely to win the vote by a wide margin. The Sunday Telegraph published a study by the Savanta Polling Institute, according to which Labour is at 46% and the Tories at 21%. And according to polls in the Sunday Times from Survation and the Observer from Opinion, the current opposition is likely to get 40%. But due to the first-past-the-post electoral system in Great Britain, the Conservatives are indeed facing an even greater defeat in the actual distribution of seats than the percentages now suggest. According to the Survation Institute, the current governing party could end up with 72 of the 650 seats in the House of Commons. That's the lowest number in its almost 200-year history. Survation's head of political research, Chris Hopkins, said about this, "Our research suggests that this vote could mean nothing less than electoral extinction for the Conservative Party." But there are more bad news for everyone, because the pub deaths in the UK continue. In the first quarter, 233 pubs closed, and that was said by the Altus Group on Monday, citing government figures. That is around a third more than in the same period last year, and the reasons are the high cost of energy and food, as well as lower spending by consumers who have less money in their pockets, and a significant tax burden on the hospitality industry. About 80 pubs closed every month, compared to around 50 in the first quarter of 2023. The number of traditional pubs in England and Wales fell from 39,401 at the end of 23 to 39,162 now. And the hardest hit was Northwest England. Most recently, industry representatives and breweries called on politicians to immediately and significantly reduce beer tax and reform trade tax, and that in view of the parliamentary elections on July 4th. Altus expert Alex Probyn said that the trade tax had risen by 49% in the past 14 years under the Conservative government. And across all sectors, companies are now paying £9.48 billion more per year than in 2010. The decline of pubs in Great Britain had already begun long before the pandemic, and reasons include the smoking ban, cheap alcohol in supermarkets, and changing drinking habits. COVID and inflation have exacerbated the trend, and large chains such as market leader Wetherspoons are just as affected as smaller pubs. And some might say, what the hell is that doing in the end of this video? This is just one perfect example of the 14 years of government we're talking about. And that's why I picked that when the information came out this week, and I thought that is a perfect example what Sunak is fighting against. That is what people see from 14 years of Tory government. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.